The Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. There was a place of crystal towers and floating gardens. Their people were tall and beautiful with pale blue skin and silver eyes that could see colors no other species knew existed. They lived for thousands of years, and they believed themselves to be the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Queen had sat upon the crystal throne for 2,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched stars die and new ones take their place. Nothing surprised her anymore. Nothing impressed her. She ruled with cold wisdom, and she expected the universe to bow before her. Princess stood beside her mother in the great hall. She was 300 years old, but among this she was still considered young. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders, and her eyes held the same cold beauty as her mother's. She was the heir to everything. One day all of this would be hers. Today was the grand convergence. Every 10 years the great powers of the galaxy came together in the palace to discuss trade and treaties and the future of 100 worlds. Diplomats and generals and kings walked through the crystal halls. Each one bowed before the queen and offered their respects. Had seen this ceremony many times before. She knew every species and every ritual. They came first with their scaled green skin and their warrior pride. They bowed stiffly because they did not like bowing to anyone. They floated in their water spheres because they could not breathe air. They gurgled their greetings through translation devices. They walked like soldiers because that was all they knew how to be. Their forearms were folded in the gesture of peace, but everyone knew they could draw weapons in half a second. Watched them all with bored eyes. She had learned their names and their customs and their weaknesses. One day she would need to rule them all. But today she simply wanted the ceremony to end. Then the humans arrived. They were a new species to the galactic stage. They had only been traveling between stars for 500 years. Most empires did not even bother to learn their names. They were small and fragile, and they died so quickly that it seemed pointless to remember them. A human who lived for 80 years was considered old. To them, this was like a flower that bloomed in the morning and died before sunset. The human delegation walked into the great hall and almost looked away, but something made her stop. There were 5 of them. The leader was a woman with silver hair and a serious face. Her name was Ambassador Laura Phillips, and she walked with the confidence of someone who had spent her whole life proving herself. Behind her came 4 guards in simple dark uniforms. They carried no visible weapons because weapons were forbidden in the throne room. They looked plain and unremarkable compared to the armored giants of other species. But one of them caught Sci. He was tall for a human with dark hair and eyes the color of a forest on Earth. He moved differently than the others. Most visitors to the palace looked around with wonder or fear. The crystal towers and floating lights amazed them. The presence of the queen made them nervous. But this man looked at everything with calm attention. He was not amazed and he was not afraid. He was simply watching and learning. His eyes swept across the room, and for one moment they met gaze. Most beings who looked at the princess quickly looked away. She was royalty. She was untouchable. To meet her eyes too long was considered improper. But this human held her gaze for a full second. He did not stare. He did not leer. He simply acknowledged her presence with a small nod as if she were any other person in the room. Then he returned to his duty of watching for threats. Felt something strange in her chest. She did not know what it was. Queen barely glanced at the humans as they bowed before her throne. The ambassador spoke the ritual words of greeting. The queen responded with polite disinterest. To her, these creatures were barely worth noticing. They would be dead in a few decades anyway. What did their opinions matter? After the ceremony, the guests mingled in the great hall. Servants brought food and drink from 100 worlds. Music played from instruments that had been old when Earth was young. Moved through the crowd and accepted compliments and marriage proposals and offers of alliance. She smiled and said the right words and felt nothing at all. She found herself watching the human guards. They stood near the edge of the room while their ambassador talked with other diplomats. 3 of them were relaxed, and seemed to be enjoying the strange sights around them. But the one with forest-colored eyes remained alert. He watched the crowd and the exits, and the servants with weapons he was not supposed to see hidden under their robes. He noticed things that others missed. A nobleman approached with wine and flattery. She accepted both and pretended to listen to his words, but her eyes kept drifting back to the human. Who was he? Why did he interest her? He was nothing special. He was just a guard. He would live and die in a span of time that meant nothing to her people, and yet she could not stop looking at him. There was still talking about trade routes or ancient history or something equally dull. Nodded at the right moments, but she was not really listening. She was thinking about the way the human had looked at her. No fear, no worship, just simple acknowledgement. Later that night, she asked her servant about the human delegation. The servant was confused by the question. Why would the princess care about such insignificant creatures? But she answered anyway because it was her duty. The humans came from a small planet called Earth. They had survived wars and disasters that should have destroyed them. They were stubborn, and they never gave up even when giving up was the smart thing to do. The guard's name was Daniel Cole. He was 32 years old. He had served in the human military for 12 years. He had been wounded in combat 3 times. He had saved 17 lives according to his records. Thanked her servant and sent her away. She stood by her window and looked out at the stars and thought about a man who would be dead before she finished her morning meditation 1,000 years from now. She did not understand why she cared, but she wanted to find out. 3 days passed and the grand convergence continued. Diplomats argued about borders and trade. Generals discussed old wars and new threats. Nobles danced and flirted and made promises they did not intend to keep. Princess attended every event because it was her duty. She smiled and nodded and said the right words and counted the hours until she could be alone. She did not see Daniel Cole again. The human delegation stayed in the outer halls where lesser species were housed. There was no reason for a princess to visit such places. There was no reason for her to think about a human guard with forest-colored eyes. And yet she thought about him anyway. On the 3rd night, the palace held a grand reception. Every important figure in the galaxy gathered in the Hall of Stars. The ceiling was made of crystal that showed the actual stars above. The floor was polished stone that reflected the lights like a mirror. It was the most beautiful room in the most beautiful palace in the known universe. Wore a gown of silver and white. Servants had spent 3 hours preparing her for this evening. She looked like a goddess from the old stories, and she felt like a prisoner in her own skin. She moved through the crowd and accepted more compliments and more proposals and more empty words. Then the screaming started. The first blast of energy hit the far wall and sent crystal shards flying through the air. The second blast killed a diplomat and shattered his water sphere. Guests ran and screamed and trampled each other in their panic. Guards drew weapons and fired at shadows they could not see. Was pushed and shoved by the crowd. She lost sight of her mother and her guards. Someone grabbed her arm and she pulled away only to see a with murder in his eyes. He wore the uniform of a servant, but he moved like a soldier. He raised a blade and spoke words in a language she did not understand. Separatists. She had heard rumors about rebels who wanted to destroy the old order. They had infiltrated the palace. They were here to kill. Ran. She was fast and she knew the palace better than any outsider. She ducked through a servant's passage and emerged in an eastern corridor far from the chaos. For a moment she thought she was safe. Then she heard footsteps behind her. 2 assassins rounded the corner. Their scales were dark green and their eyes were cold. They carried energy weapons that hummed with deadly power. One of them smiled when he saw her. The princess of the What a Prize. Backed against the wall. She had been trained in combat since she was a child, but she wore no armor and carried no weapon. Her ceremonial gown would not stop a blade or a blast. She was going to die in this corridor, and no one would even know. The first assassin raised his weapon. Then something happened that would remember for the rest of her very long life. Daniel Cole came through a side passage like a storm made flesh. He moved faster than any human should be able to move. Before the assassins could react, he had crossed the distance between them. His hand struck the first's wrist, and the weapon went flying. In the same motion, he grabbed the fallen weapon and fired at the second assassin. The stun blast hit the target and the dropped to the floor. The first assassin drew a blade. It was curved and sharp and made for killing. He slashed at Daniel's chest, and the blade cut through uniform and skin and muscle. Blood splashed across the crystal floor. Daniel did not stop. He caught the assassin's arm and twisted. Bones cracked. The blade fell. Daniel drove his elbow into his face and then slammed him against the wall with enough force to crack the stone. The assassin slumped to the ground and did not move. Daniel stood there breathing hard with blood running down his chest. He looked with those forest-colored eyes. "Your Highness," he said, "we need to move." Stared at him. She had seen warriors from 100 worlds. She had watched generals demonstrate their deadly arts. She had witnessed duels that left both fighters dead, but she had never seen anything like this. They were stronger than humans, faster. They lived longer and trained longer, and their bodies were simply better in every measurable way. Every species in the galaxy knew this. A human should not be able to defeat two warriors. It was impossible. And yet Daniel had done it while wounded. "You are bleeding," she said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "I have had worse," he replied. "Please, Princess, your safety is what matters." He offered his hand. It was covered in blood. Some of it was green from most of it was red from his own wound. Took his hand. Daniel led her through the corridors. Somehow he knew where to go even though he was a stranger to this world. When they heard footsteps ahead, he pulled her into shadows. When they found a locked door, he found another way. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. More assassins found them near the inner gardens, 3 this time. Daniel pushed behind him and faced them without hesitation. The fight was brutal and fast. Daniel took 2 more wounds, one on his arm, one on his leg. But when it was over, all 3 were on the ground and Daniel was still standing. "How are you doing this?" asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Stubbornness," Daniel said. It was almost a joke. Then he stumbled and caught himself on the wall. "We need to keep moving." She put his arm over her shoulder and helped him walk. He was heavy and his blood was warm against her skin. She did not understand why she was helping him. He was supposed to be protecting her, but somehow they were protecting each other. They reached the royal safe room just as strength began to fail. Guards were waiting there with weapons drawn. They saw their princess covered in blood and holding a wounded human, and they did not know what to do. "This man saved my life," said. "Get him medical attention immediately." One of the guards hesitated. "Princess, he is only human. Our physicians are needed for our own people who were wounded in the attack." Turned to look at him. Her silver eyes were cold and hard as the stars themselves. "Now," she said. The guard obeyed. Daniel was taken away on a stretcher. He had lost consciousness from blood loss. His face was pale and his breathing was shallow. The physician said he might not survive the night. Stood in the safe room covered in human blood and watched them carry him away. She did not understand what she was feeling. It was not gratitude. It was not guilt. It was something deeper and stranger. A human had nearly died to save her life. A creature who would live and die in a heartbeat of her existence had thrown himself between her and death without hesitation. Why? She needed to know, and if Daniel Cole survived, she was going to find out. Daniel Cole did not die. The physicians worked through the night to save him. They used technology that could repair damage no human doctor had ever seen. They closed his wounds and replaced the blood he had lost and watched in amazement as his body began to heal itself. Humans were not supposed to be this resilient. They were soft creatures with fragile bodies and short lives. A blade should have killed him. The blood loss alone should have been fatal. But somehow this human kept breathing. Somehow he kept living. On the second day, Daniel opened his eyes. On the third day, he was sitting up and reading. On the fourth day, he was asking when he could return to duty. The physicians called it a miracle. Daniel called it being too stubborn to die. Princess visited him on the third day. She had spent 2 days in meetings and ceremonies. The assassination attempt had failed, and the separatists had been captured. Queen was furious and demanded justice. The government sent formal apologies and promised harsh punishment for the traitors. Everything was politics and power and words that meant nothing. Had smiled through all of it and thought only of the human who had saved her life. She went to the healing chambers without telling anyone. The guards at the door recognized her and stepped aside. She walked through rooms filled with advanced medical equipment and found Daniel in a small chamber at the end of the hall. He was sitting up in bed reading from a data tablet. When he saw her, he immediately tried to stand. "Please," she said, "you are still recovering." "I am functional, Your Highness," he replied, but he sat back down. Looked at him for a long moment. The wounds on his body had been healed, but she could still see the faint marks where the blade had cut him. Human skin did not regenerate as perfectly as flesh. He would carry those scars for the rest of his short life. "You almost died," she said. "Occupational hazard." There was something in his voice. It took her a moment to realize it was humor. This man had nearly bled to death saving her, and he was making jokes about it. "I am glad you are not harmed, Princess," Daniel continued. "When you are ready, I would like to return to my duties with the delegation." Sat down in a chair beside his bed. It was not proper behavior for royalty. She did not care. "I have a question for you," she said. Daniel waited. "Why did you do it?" "I am sorry, Your Highness. I do not understand the question." She leaned forward. "You had no obligation to protect me. I am not your sovereign. You could have found shelter with your own people when the attack began. You could have stayed hidden and saved yourself. Instead, you fought 3 separate times against enemies who should have killed you. You were stabbed and cut, and you lost enough blood to kill most humans. Why?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. His eyes were thoughtful, and there was something old in them, something that did not match his young face. "Permission to speak freely?" he asked. "Granted." "Because it was the right thing to do." Waited for more. There was no more. "That is all?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "You were in danger. I could help. Where I come from, that is all the reason a person needs. We do not save lives because of politics or rewards or obligation. We save lives because every person matters, because the universe is dark and cold and the only warmth we have is each other." Did not know how to respond. She had lived for 300 years. She had heard 1,000 speeches about duty and honor and the glory of the empire. But no one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made duty sound so simple and so profound at the same time. "You humans are strange," she said softly. "We have been told that before." She smiled. It was not the practiced smile she wore for nobles and diplomats. It was real. "I think I would like to understand you better," she said. Daniel's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. "I'm not sure what I could teach a princess." "You could tell me about your world, about your people, about why a species that lives such short lives throws themselves into danger to save strangers." He studied her face as if he was trying to understand something. Then he nodded. "It would be my honor, Your Highness." She came back the next day, and the next. Each time she stayed longer and they talked more. Daniel told her about Earth. He described blue oceans and green forests and cities that never slept. He told her about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity and the peace they had built from the ashes. He spoke of art and music and stories that had survived for thousands of years, even though the people who created them were long dead. Told him about. She described the crystal towers that sang when the wind blew through them. She explained the politics of her court and the weight of her crown. She admitted things to him that she had never told anyone: the loneliness of being royal, the fear that she would never be good enough, the exhaustion of living in a world where every word was a weapon. Daniel listened. He did not offer advice or try to solve her problems. He simply listened with those forest-colored eyes and made her feel heard. One evening, she asked him about human philosophy. "You live such short lives," she said. "How do you bear it? How do you find meaning in a span of time that means nothing to us?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Maybe that is exactly why we find meaning. We know we do not have forever. Every choice matters because we cannot take it back. Every moment is precious because we have so few of them. We cannot afford to waste time being anything less than what we could be." Felt something shift inside her, something she had not felt in centuries. "Tell me more," she said. He told her about philosophers who argued about the nature of good and evil. He told her about soldiers who threw themselves on explosives to save their friends. He told her about doctors who worked until they collapsed to save strangers. He told her about ordinary people who did extraordinary things simply because it was the right thing to do. "Your species has so little time," said, "and yet you spend so much of it helping others." Daniel smiled. "That is the whole point. Life is short. Love while you can. Help while you can. Leave the universe a little better than you found it. That is all any of us can do." Looked at this human who would be dust before she finished her first 1,000 years. She thought about his words and his courage, and the scars he would carry forever because he had chosen to help a stranger. For the first time in 300 years, she felt something new. It was small and fragile like a flame in the dark, but it was warm. She wanted to protect it. She wanted to see where it would lead. She wanted to understand what it meant to be human. When the physicians cleared Daniel for duty, he expected to return to his post with the human delegation. Ambassador Laura Phillips had work for him to do. Treaties needed to be signed, and the delegation would soon return to Earth. His time on was supposed to end. Then Princess made a request that changed everything. She went to her mother and asked that Daniel Cole be assigned as her personal liaison to the human delegation. It was an official position that would require him to stay at the palace and work directly with the princess on matters of diplomacy between humans and. The request had never been made before. No outsider had ever served in such close contact with the royal family. The idea of a human holding such a position was unthinkable. Queen looked at her daughter with cold silver eyes. "You wish to elevate a human to a position of honor in our court," she said. "A creature who will be dead before you finish your morning meditation 1,000 years from now." "He saved my life," replied. "Surely that deserves some recognition." The queen studied her daughter for a long moment. She saw something in his eyes that she did not like, but she had never been able to deny her daughter anything that truly mattered. "Very well," she said. "Let this human serve as your liaison. Perhaps it will satisfy your curiosity about these strange creatures." Bowed and thanked her mother and tried not to smile. The court was not happy. Nobles whispered in the crystal halls about the princess and her human pet. They wondered if she had lost her mind. They speculated about human tricks and alien mind control and other explanations that made more sense than the truth. The truth was simple. The truth was that had found someone who made her feel alive. Over the following months, she and Daniel spent nearly every day together. At first, they maintained the proper distance between a princess and her servant. They spoke formally and met only in official settings. But slowly, the walls came down. Showed Daniel the crystal gardens where light bent into colors no human eye had ever seen. She watched his face as he looked at flowers that glowed with inner fire and trees that sang in the wind. He did not pretend to be unimpressed the way courtiers did. He simply looked and smiled and said it was beautiful. Daniel taught her to cook a human dish called spaghetti. The palace kitchens were confused by his requests for simple ingredients. Flour and water and tomatoes were not the stuff of royal meals. But Daniel insisted and helped him, and they made a mess of the kitchen and laughed as sauce splattered across their clothes. She took him to witness the birth of a star. They traveled in a royal ship to a nebula where gas and dust were collapsing into something new. They watched through windows of unbreakable crystal as light exploded across the darkness. Daniel stood silent for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "We have only been among the stars for 500 years, he said, "and already we have seen this. Imagine what we will see in another 500, in another 5,000. You think about the future, said, even though you will not be there to see it. That is why I think about it, Daniel replied. Everything we do is for the people who come after us. Every step forward, every discovery, every sacrifice. We build a road that we will never walk ourselves because we know our children will walk it, and their children after that. Looked at him and felt that warmth in her chest grow stronger. One evening Daniel played her recordings of human music. He called it jazz. It was chaotic and unpredictable and nothing like the perfect harmonies of composers. At first did not understand it. Then she listened more closely and heard something beneath the chaos. There was a conversation happening between the instruments. Each one was speaking and listening and responding in real time. It was messy and alive and beautiful. She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in decades. Your species is endlessly surprising, she told him. I could say the same about you, he replied. The court continued to watch and whisper. An ambassador suggested that humans had developed some kind of chemical weapon that affected minds. A general questioned whether the princess had been compromised by enemy agents. Even the servants began to talk about the strange relationship between their princess and the human guard. Heard the whispers and did not care. For the first time in her life she was not performing. She was not playing the role of princess that had been assigned to her at birth. She was simply being herself. And Daniel saw her. He saw her fears and her hopes and her doubts and her dreams. He did not worship her like the nobles. He did not fear her like the servants. He simply treated her as a person, an equal, a friend. One night they stood on a balcony overlooking the twin moons of. The moons were silver and gold, and they hung in the sky like jewels on dark velvet. The wind was warm and carried the scent of flowers from the gardens below. Looked at Daniel and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. I have something to tell you, she said. Daniel turned to face her. His expression was calm, but she could see tension in his shoulders. He had felt the change between them. He knew what was coming. I know this is impossible, she continued. I know what the court thinks. I know what my mother will say. I know that you will live and die in a span of time that means nothing to my people. But I have made my choice. Daniel did not speak. He waited. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. They were heavy and light at the same time. They were terrifying and wonderful. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand. I am just a soldier, he said. I have nothing to offer an empire. You have offered me truth, replied. You have offered me respect. You have offered me yourself without conditions or calculations. In 300 years no one else has done that. Your people will never accept me. Then I will teach them. Humanity has spent 500 years proving the galaxy wrong about what you can achieve. I think it is time they learned that lesson as well. Daniel looked at her with those forest-colored eyes. She saw doubt and hope and fear and love all tangled together. She saw a man who had spent his whole life protecting others and had never expected anyone to choose him. Are you sure? He asked. She stepped closer until they were only inches apart. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. She kissed him. The twin moons watched silently as the princess of the greatest empire in the galaxy gave her heart to a human soldier who had nothing but his courage and his love. It was impossible. It was beautiful. It was the beginning of everything. Queen sat alone on her crystal throne and waited for her daughter. The throne room was empty except for the light that filtered through windows of colored glass. Shadows stretched across the polished floor like fingers reaching for something they could never touch. The queen had sent away her guards and advisors. This conversation would be private. She had ruled for 2,000 years. She had seen civilizations crumble and new ones rise from the ashes. She had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Nothing in the universe could surprise her anymore. And yet her daughter had surprised her. The doors opened and Princess walked into the throne room. She wore a simple gown of white and silver. Her silver hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked young and vulnerable and stronger than she had ever been. "You summoned me," Mother said. She bowed formally. "I have received 17 official protests regarding your relationship with the human." Straightened, "I'm aware of the concerns. The High Command calls it an insult to their species. They believe you chose a human over their nobles intentionally." "I did choose intentionally, but not to insult anyone. The military council believes you have been mentally compromised. They suggest that humans have developed some kind of mind control technology. They believe everyone is plotting against them. It is why they have no allies." Queen's expression did not change. "Even our own nobility questions your judgment. They say the heir to the empire has lost her mind over a creature that will be dead before she notices the passage of a single century." Met her mother's eyes. "They question because they do not understand. I will teach them." The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps. Her robe swept across the floor behind her. She moved with the grace of someone who had practiced every gesture for thousands of years. "Tell me about this human," she said. "Daniel Cole. What makes him worthy of the heir to the greatest empire in the galaxy?" Did not hesitate. "He is brave. When assassins came to kill me, he threw himself between us without hesitation. He was wounded 3 times and he never stopped protecting me." Bravery can be found in any species. "He is honest. He does not tell me what I want to hear. He tells me the truth even when the truth is difficult. In 300 years, no one else has done that. Honesty is rare but not unique. He sees me, not my crown, not my power, not the empire I will one day rule. He sees me as a person, as a woman, as someone worth knowing for who she is rather than what she represents." Queen stopped in front of her daughter. They stood face to face with nothing between them but the truth. "He will die," the queen said, "in 50 years, perhaps 60. A heartbeat compared to you will watch him grow old and weak. You will watch him fade away. And you will still have thousands of years ahead of you filled with the memory of what you lost." Felt tears in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Then I will treasure every heartbeat," she said. "I will make every moment count. I will love him completely and without reservation because that is what he deserves. And when he is gone, I will carry him with me forever." "You would give up so much for so little time." "I would give up nothing. I would gain everything. A lifetime with Daniel is worth more than an eternity without him." The queen was silent for a long moment. Her silver eyes searched her daughter's face for doubt or fear or uncertainty. She found none. "He cannot give you heirs that will be accepted by the bloodlines," said. "Then I will change what the bloodlines accept. You would risk the empire itself." "I would risk everything to live truthfully. You taught me that an empire built on lies cannot stand. How can I rule with integrity if I deny my own heart?" Queen studied her daughter. She saw the child she had raised and the woman she had become. She saw courage and conviction and a love that burned like a star. "Who is he?" she asked quietly. "Who is this human who has captured my daughter's spirit?" The doors to the throne room opened. Daniel Cole walked into the chamber. He wore not his military uniform but the formal attire of a consort. The clothes should have looked wrong on a human, but somehow they suited him. He walked the length of the throne room with steady steps and knelt before the queen. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am Daniel Cole of Earth. I am a soldier. I am a son. I am a man who loves your daughter with everything I am and everything I will ever be." He raised his eyes to meet hers. There was no fear in them, only calm determination. "I have no wealth," he continued. "I have no titles. I have no army or fleet or empire to offer you. I am just one human in a galaxy of trillions, but I offer what I have. My loyalty, my service, my life. Everything I am belongs to your daughter if she will have me." The queen looked down at this strange creature who knelt before her throne. She thought about the protests from other species. She thought about the scandal this would cause. She thought about the centuries of tradition that would be shattered. Then she thought about the light in her daughter's eyes. "You would bind yourself to an empire you barely understand?" she asked. "You would give up your people and your entire way of life?" Daniel did not flinch. "With respect, Your Majesty, I would not be giving anything up. I would be gaining a family." Moved to stand beside him, she took his hand and helped him rise to his feet. They stood together before the queen, human and mortal and immortal, two people who had found each other across the vast darkness of space. "Who is he?" Queen asked one final time. Looked at Daniel with love shining in her silver eyes. She looked at her mother with certainty that could move stars. "The man I chose." The queen was silent. The throne room was silent. The entire universe seemed to hold its breath. Then Queen smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. "Very well," she said. "Let the galaxy learn that the do not fear change." She stepped forward and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Welcome to the family, human. Try not to die too quickly. My daughter would be most displeased." Daniel smiled. "I will do my best, Your Majesty." The wedding of Princess and Daniel Cole became the most watched event in galactic history. Billions of beings from thousands of worlds witnessed a human stand beside royalty as an equal. Some watched with disgust. Some watched with wonder. Some watched with hope. In the years that followed, their union changed everything. Human resilience merged with wisdom. Human creativity sparked new possibilities that the ancient empire had never imagined. And the children of their love grew to become leaders who combined the best of both species. Daniel did not live forever. He grew old and eventually he died, as all humans do. But he died surrounded by love and family. He died knowing that his life had mattered. He died holding the hand of a woman who had chosen him over an entire empire. And when historians look back at the moment the universe changed, they always return to that throne room, to a queen's question and a princess's answer. "Who is he?" "The man I chose." Because in the end that was all that mattered. Not species, not tradition or politics or the expectations of a galaxy. Just two people who looked at each other and saw something worth fighting for. That was the human way. And the universe was better for it.